Hey guys, what's going on? Memes here, and I just want to touch on the situation with Mr. Andy Ngo. As we know, this past weekend, uh, he was attacked at a protest in Portland. Uh, I realized I kind of glazed over it the other day when I was talking about the Antifa thing, but now that things have kind of settled and some of the news has gone back and forth over a couple of issues, I did want to touch upon this, and I did also want to kind of do it in a little bit of a different way than what we kind of normally do. We kind of just jump through some articles. So what I wanted to do here is to show just essentially based upon what I know from previous videos and other things that have been written, I wanted to just search the Googles for Mr. Andy Ngo and just kind of see what came up. And so essentially what we had over here is I searched for Mr. Andy Ngo and I took the two top stories. So we have from the National Review here, to my knowledge, is a bit more of a conservative publication, and then we have Vox over here as well, which, as far as I know, is generally a bit more of a liberal uh, publication as well. So I chose both these articles, and I actually want to go through them side by side because what I'm seeming to notice more and more is depending on where you get your news from, depending on what videos you watch, articles you read, very often we seem to pretty much be looking at the same thing, but we're going through and almost dictating two very different narratives. So let's start with the National Review over here. As we can see from the title, Andy Ngo, Antifa, KKK, RICO. And this is by Jack Fowler. So this was published today. So as you can see, we have a black bloc protester here, it appears. An Antifa protester yells at law enforcement during competing demonstrations in Portland, Oregon, June 4th, 2017. So that appears to be some stock footage from a previous event. So apparently, we'll go through the article. Conservative journalist Tom McArnold has a very worthwhile piece in the new outfit, Issue and Insights, analyzing possible legal responses to ongoing brutal Antifa attacks, such as this week's hospitalizing assault on journalist Andy Ngo in Portland, Oregon, using the Federal Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, aka RICO. And then they have a link to Tom's report there, which we're not going to go into now, which includes the following from our colleague, Andy McCarthy. And quote, loosely knit interstate enterprises such as Antifa are what RICO was made for, according to McCarthy. They can be investigated as organizations unified by ideology, tactics. All members can be held responsible for the disparate acts of all the members, and harsh state law penalties for violent crimes can be widely applied. Uh, okay, so, and this is what I kind of brought up the other day. It's just my big thing is when we start holding all of any group or community accountable for the acts of some, we just have to be careful about what we're going to do. I understand there have been acts of violence here, and to my knowledge, and again, this is an op-ed, I believe RICO has to do with transfer of funds. So if they are dispersing funds throughout the different Antifa chapters between the different states, okay, I can get that, but I don't have any knowledge of that. That could be the case. So I just wanted to start off with the National Review article. Now let's hop over to the Vox. So we'll kind of just do a side-by-side analysis. So the Vox article says, the assault on conservative journalist Andy Ngo explained. An unjustifiable attack and subsequent controversy spotlighting the militant left-wing group Antifa. This is by Zach Beauchamp. And as we can see here, Andy Ngo, a Portland-based journalist, after he was attacked during protest on June 29, 2019 in Portland, Oregon. Several groups from the left and right clashed after competing demonstrations spilled into the streets. And that's from Amoriah Ratner from Getty Images. All right, last Saturday, the far-right Proud Boys group held a rally in Portland, Oregon. Left-wing groups, including Portland branch of the militant Antifa group, were put together a counter-protest whose attendees clashed with the Proud Boys. But the most notable instance of violence has nothing to do with the Proud Boys. It was an attack by counter-protesters on the conservative journalist Andy Ngo that reportedly sent him to the hospital. In footage captured by Portland-based reporter Jim Ryan, demonstrators doused Ngo in a milkshake, punch him, and yell at him In short, it looks a lot like an unprovoked, unjustifiable, reprehensible assault on an observer, a journalist, merely because the protesters don't like him. But the aftermath of the attack, the narratives both sides have spun out of the basic facts established by the footage is much trickier to access. So, okay, so in the National Review article over here, basically they're going right into we have laws on the books, we can disassemble this organization using laws on the books. Okay, I've also heard the whole the unmasking laws, which certain folks are suggesting. As we discussed yesterday, there are a number of states that do have those laws, but for my mind, folks have brought up the free speech issue, and again, there have been court cases ruling both ways. It really seems to depend on how much of scrutiny the state has or the court has, and basically if you have a track record of violence against individuals as well. So, and over here in the Vox article, as we can see, they straight up just say it is an unjustifiable attack right here. They're stating that Antifa is a militant left-wing group. They're saying the Proud Boys, a far-right group. They're talking about far-right, far-left. But then they're also going into the actual, well, there may have been a precipitation to this. And again, I haven't seen any footage specifically showing what happened. I do remember that there were rumors that Andy may have potentially been looking at some roster lists, potentially trying to film that. And apparently in the past he has doxed a member of Antifa as well. I'm almost curious about doxing in this respect, because at what point does it become in the public interest? Because if you're a reporter and you're doing investigative journalism, okay, at what point are you able to reveal this individual? Is it in the public interest? So we're in uncharted territory, or I'm sure it's been charted, but maybe we've just gone off the map a little bit, and we're trying to find our way back in this whole internet age. Because let's face it, there's a difference between something popping up in your local paper, oh my God, people like me, but before things popping up in your local paper versus, okay, something's going on, and putting it on the internet. Just because at that point, all of humanity has access to it, more or less, if you have access to an internet device. I realize I was making an overstatement, but we got lots of folks being added each day. So let's continue on. Basically, in the National Review article, writing in National Review nearly 2 years ago, McCarthy pointed out that in terms of confronting Antifa or other domestic terrorist organization, we have a more robust array of state and federal law enforcement powers than we have ever had. Moreover, coordination between federal and state law enforcement, national security officers is as good as it's ever been. All that is required to gut Antifa is the will to do so. The will to say, regardless of our disparate political views, when we Americans draw the line at violent extortion that eviscerates our right to speak, assemble, and engage in constitutionally protected political activity. All right. I mean, that seems a fair statement. Now, if you tie it back to the whole RICO thing, if you can prove that, okay, sure. There's definitely issues, because again, like we were talking about yesterday, something about seeing Americans hate, hurt, and kill each other, that's not what I remember. Again, maybe it was just me. I don't know. So, and we'll go on. By the way, Twitchy provides an excellent tweet by tweet. Okay, so they're talking about, they're criticizing the Portland mayor, his excuse mongering as to why Antifa thuggery, a regular event in the Rose City, once again occurred without any intervention by the city spectator cops. Okay, I'm curious what the orders on the ground were, if they were just meant to just kind of stay back, if they're meant to, as soon as they see any level of agitation, disperse. Apparently, I mean, Andy still got attacked, so I mean, we got to be straight with that. Related prosecutors, okay, all right, that goes into the unmasking issue. Meanwhile, Portland Police Chief Daniel Outlaw, not making that up, this week called for an anti-mask law, but at the same time diminished the need for such law. So we call for an, okay. A policy that prohibits wearing a mask to a protest will have police focusing on the wrong issue. Behavior is the issue, not the mask, she said. It could be argued that the mask is an important symbolic part of the protesters' message. There are many legitimate reasons to wear masks, including political and religious reasons. Okay. And that was a very short article, and that was per the Oregonian from the last part there. So, what we're basically hearing is sounds like the police chief is saying, considering pushing an anti-mask law. Okay, I feel that sunlight is the best disinfectant, especially if we feel like we have the best arguments. Like if you're a member of Antifa and you really think you truly have the winning argument, I ain't commanding you to do anything. All I'm saying is, if you remove the mask and you look at somebody like a human being, I think most folks are good people, and I think good people can work through this. Maybe we're too far gone, but I'm not going to give up yet. I don't think so. So we'll pop back over to the Vox article, and the Vox article is much more thorough. And again, these are the two first articles that came up. So for your comparison here, National Review was first, as well as the Vox article was second, as we can see right there. And again, this could be customized to me. I am logged in with my Google account here. So basically, they go into the different narratives. In the dominant narrative, pushed by the conservative and mainstream media, like the attack on Ngo is evidence of a serious left-wing violence problem in America. Antifa, they argue, is a group of street thugs that has repeatedly attacked journalists and poses a genuine threat to public safety. The fact that the left tolerates Antifa or even celebrates them is proof of serious rot. Senator Ted Cruz from Texas has called for an investigation into the events in Portland. And then I pray for the full and speedy recovery of journalist Andy Ngo, writes Kevin McCarthy, the House Minority Leader. The hate and violence perpetuated by Antifa must be condemned in the strongest possible way by all Americans. That's fair. We're condemning violence there. But according to a second narrative, offered primarily by less well-known left liberal writers and social media accounts, the mainstream media is getting it all wrong. Ngo is not an innocent victim, but a far-right sympathizer who has doxed Antifa members in the past, potentially facilitating their harassment, and provokes them so that he can broadcast the results. The outpouring of sympathy for Ngo in this account is actually evidence that the mainstream media is falling for Ngo's grift, funneling money to his Patreon and legitimizing a right-wing smear campaign against a group that's working to protect the people from the threat of violence from groups like the Proud Boys. Okay. So, this is generally what I've observed, and all I know is I'm getting kind of creeped out because it really does kind of seem like we're going back to Weimar Germany. As it's been explained to a number of folks, apparently there were folks in Weimar Germany, they were communists. They were promoting communism. In response to that ideology, you saw the rise of the National German Socialist Workers' Party. We colloquially call them the Nazis. So you ended up having street violence between communists and Nazis. What are we seeing here? We're seeing events happening. And now we're seeing individuals whom I believe some identify as communists, and we're seeing opposing groups rise up, such as the Proud Boys. And to be fair, to call them all Nazis, I don't think that's fair. However, one of the events I went to, I reviewed some of the footage. There was at least one person there, at least according to him, identifies as a National Socialist. You can take that for what it's worth. I'm just letting you know based upon my lived experience. So we'll go on a little bit more through here. Now, the Vox article is more detailed. Whether that's design specifically, I don't normally read these publications. Perhaps I should more to try to diversify my news source. But I do see them continually calling them out. As you can see, Andy got beat up. Here's the thing. You don't excuse it. You don't excuse it. Do we necessarily know what exactly precipitates that? But, dude, even still, violence, you still got to condemn it. And they reference his basically being involved with the intellectual dark web and being a journalist. And they're going over his social media. They're criticizing him for some of his articles that he's written, uh, and now they're saying that they're playing him up for that. And where is it? Just at the end of the article here, I just wanted to finish this up here. Again, they go through it, but when we get to the very end here, here's the thing. They wrap up, and actually they do compare this to certain other events. We'll just go with this. The case of the Covington kids there, basically citing that as another instance where video came out. A lot of folks had an initial gut reaction, but oh my God, oh look at all these kids in MAGA hat making fun of this poor guy. You end up having the full footage because let's face it, to sit through a 2-something hour live stream, I'm not sure most folks do that. They just see the quick 10, 20, 30-second clip, and the way it's framed, it evokes an emotional response. People get pissed because you look at that, you're like, dude, regardless of him being a Native American elder or not, it's an older gentleman, and you just see somebody with just what appears to just be a really smug look on their face. Yeah, there was a visceral response. The response, I would say, wasn't proportionate because he's a kid. And kids shouldn't be political, but unfortunately, this seems to be the world we're living in. But yeah, just to wrap up the Vox article right here, they just straight up say, the attack on Andy Ngo is not the first situation where political factions have used high-profile video to claim that the other side is the real threat to the public. And unfortunately, that's my ad, nor will it be the last. So this is the current state of things. Ooh, the ad is updated. We're just going through. We're seeing the same events, and depending on where you're getting your sourcing, depending on if you just read the title of the article or not, if you're actually just going through the beginning of the article, or depending on how through, your view can be a lot different. And I don't necessarily think one particular situation that you see where somebody writes an article, is that necessarily going to influence everything a person thinks? I don't think so. But it is a contributing factor, because it really bothers me when I hear folks say, people are dumb. People are dumb. I'm not sure I've really observed that in my life. Do people do stupid shit? Absolutely. I do stupid stuff every single day. But my general feeling is people are smart. They know what they know, often well. However, when confronted with something that they're unfamiliar with, they often refer to folks that they know and trust and see what they are saying. I mean, isn't that reasonable? I mean, these are the folks that you have faith in to bring you information. And I think the attack on Andy, this is one of those things, because we even saw CNN, who many folks on the more conservative right, as well as a number of libertarians that I see, basically are saying, oh, well, CNN, they're not calling folks out. Well, guess what? They called it out. There was an op-ed calling for the unmasking of Antifa there. My big thing with this is, if we only know what we know, and you got a lot of different journalists that are basically just kind of watching each other, and if they're watching their own network and other maybe more local networks and different sources that they tend to agree with, if you don't really see it, and the only other time you see it, you feel like the other side is being disingenuous, you're going to discount that. But I think with Andy, it's just, regardless of whatever happened before, it's like you got a group of folks kicking the hell out of a dude. He happens to be a journalist as well. So you also hit the intersect where the folks that are covering this, it's got to hit home, because if you're within the journalistic community, there's got to be something about seeing someone else, even if you disagree with them, he's part of your community. You might hate him, and the Vox article does refer to that. He disagrees with what Mr. No writes, but you still got to call it out. So, I mean, hopefully this, if we can take anything away, Andy will make a full recovery, and hopefully we'll have a little bit more nuance, or maybe we'll at least think twice before we jump to a visceral response. Maybe we'll wait an hour or so before we put out a tweet or something. I realize social media incentivizes being the first to give a hot take on something, but just because you can, is it good? That's all I got for now, guys. If you like this content, hey, feel free to watch some more. So, thanks everyone for watching. Peace out.